מסכת בבא מציאה דף פה, הסוחר את הפרה לחרוש בהר וחרש בבקעה, אם נשבר הקנקן פטור. בבקעה וחרש בהר, אם נשבר הקנקן חייב. If somebody rented a cow to plow with it, and he rented not only the cow but also the plow itself, the instrument that goes into the ground. Here's a picture of a plowshare that the metal part goes down into the ground, and there's a handle to steer it to make sure it's going in the right path. So the person rented the cow and the cow share, and they agreed that he would use it in the mountain where it's very rocky and it's tough dirt and more likely for the plow to break. He instead used it in the valley where it's easier to plow and less likely for the plow to break. If it breaks, if the bottom part here that goes into the ground, if that broke off, then he is not liable, because that he's doing a better, the renter is doing a favor. He's actually using it in a less strenuous way than they had agreed upon. But the other way around, if they agreed that he would use it in a valley and then he goes to use it on the mountain and it breaks, the renter is liable, because that goes against the agreement. He's using it in tougher terrain where it's more likely to break, and the owner did not agree to that. Ladush bakitnit v'dash b'tevuah patur. Ladush b'tevuah v'dash bakitnit chayav mipnei shakitnit mahaleket. And similarly, he hired a cow to thresh on legumes, which are more slippery than grain. So the cow would walk on top of it, or walk on a board on top of it, so that by walking on that and it rolling around, the outside shell would come off of the grain inside. So if he told the owner, I'm gonna be threshing legumes, which are very slippery, and then he only used grains, and the cow slipped and was injured, he's not liable, because he was actually using it for something less slippery. However, if he agreed, listen, I'm going to use this to thresh grains, and then he used the cow to thresh legumes, which are more slippery, then he's liable, because he used it in a riskier way than they had agreed upon. Gemara. Hecha de la shaneba man mishalem. Okay, now a question. You told me complicated cases where they agreed on one thing and then he did something else. But what if he's following exactly what they agreed upon? So then who would be responsible, assuming that the renter also hired workers to work with the animal? There are two workers that work with an animal typically. One would be holding this handle to lead the plow in the right way, and the other who would be pulling or pushing the animal, goading the animal here with a whip or with a stick, so that the animal would go the right way. This guy is particularly talented because he seems to be doing both, each with one hand. But our Gemara is going to discuss where there's two people doing it and who is responsible for a breaking in a regular case. So it's no longer with the renter and the owner, because the renter is following what the owner had stipulated. But now the renter himself, who hired these workers, who can he blame? Amara Papa, Denakit Parasha Mishalem. So the Papa says, whoever is holding the goad pays, because the one holding the goad, who is directing the animal, obviously must have done a bad job, because he made the animal go to a bad spot where it was likely that the tool would break. Rav Shisha b'det Rav Idi amar denaket mana mishalem. Rav Shisha, the son of Idi, disagrees and says, no, whoever is holding the tool, the plowshare, is responsible, because that person has to know and make sure if you're coming upon a rock or an obstacle, then you have to lift up the plow so that it won't break on it. So that person is responsible. Filcheta denaket mana mishalem, and halakha is like that second opinion. Viduchta demihazki gundere tarvaihu mishalamim. But if it's a place where it's very rocky, then both of them have to pay. They share it equally, because it's probably both of their faults. You need two to tango in that case. So it's not just a one-off. If it's a one-off rock, then the person who's holding the plow should have seen it and picked it up. But if it's very rocky, then the one goading the ox also is responsible to make sure the ox will go in a good direction. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, mocher para lechavero v'amar lo, para zo nagchaniti, nashchaniti, ba'ataniti, rabsaniti, v'aya ba mum echad usnafo ben hamumin, הרי זה mikach ta'ut, mum זה ומום אחר, אין בזה mikach ta'ut. Now Rabbi Yochanan teaches that. This is citing a Tosefta. Somebody sells a cow to someone else and says, listen, I want you to know this cow is not perfect. It gores, it bites, it kicks, and it lies down and won't move. And so he's giving him all these, caveats. You can buy it, but just know I'm warning you. Now, if in reality it had only one of those defects, right? Only that it kicks. That's it. But so why did he list all of them? He wanted to list them together with all the other ones so that the buyer would not pay attention particularly. The buyer would look at it and say, well, I don't see it biting. I don't see it lying down. I think the seller is just exaggerating. Maybe the seller just wants to cover all his bases. And so I'm not really worried about it. And it turns out that it in fact has that one defect. This is a false sale. It's a sale on false premises. Even though the seller actually did tell him, right, 5 things that are wrong with it, but in fact only one is true. So because only one of the 5 were true, the buyer, looking at it, assumed that none of them are true, and therefore bought it, thinking that actually it's just fine, and the seller is covering his bases. However, if the seller says, listen, it kicks and it has other defects, then the other defects, yes, covering his bases, but he did say explicitly that it kicks, and he highlighted that more than the others. So then the buyer should have realized that, yes, in fact, it really kicks, and he's just adding the other as a catch-all. So if the buyer takes it anyway, and he says, oh, it kicks, so I want to return it. The seller said, I told you it kicks. Yeah, but you told me it does other things too. I said, no, that was a general thing. So that's the difference. It's kind of like in medicine commercials. They'll tell you, this medicine will heal everything, but then it gives a list of 100 diseases and problems, including death and all that. So because they list so many, and you figure, well, I took it once and I didn't get a headache, so probably they're all just saying these to cover their bases, but you just kind of ignore it. And then if something happens, you go to the pharmacy company, say, well, you didn't tell me that it's going to cause this and that. Says, well, yeah, we did. It's on page 17 of 100 pages. So by listing all of the things, it actually does not give any information. It's actually too much information. The same as no information. That's the point. But if the pharmacy company would say, listen, this is likely to cause a stroke, among other things, so then you can't go complain and say, you didn't tell me about a stroke, because that one was singled out to be a high likelihood. All right, so this makes sense. Now, Tanyana Mehachi, we have a baraita that supports what Rabbi Yochanan just said. HaMocher shivcha lechavero v'amar lo shivcha zo shotahi nichpeti mesho'omemeti v'aya ba mum echad usfano ben hamumin harei ze mikach ta'ut mum ze umum acher en ze mikach ta'ut. Same thing before was selling an animal. Here, if someone sells a maidservant and he says, listen, this maidservant, far from perfect, she is mentally insane, epileptic, crazy, and so on. So if she in fact had only one of these diseases, and the seller just listed all of them to mix the real one into it, so it wouldn't be so noticeable, and then the buyer comes and says, she's epileptic. Why didn't you tell me? So I did tell you. I told you all those things. Yeah, but you told me too many things, and it really was. She didn't have all the other ones. But only this one. So you really didn't highlight it. You told me too many things, and now I didn't realize. So he can return the maidservant. This is a false sale. But if he says she's epileptic and other things, then, and it turns out she is epileptic, then he can return. Then he cannot return it because the seller told him epileptic, even though he said other things as a general category. And he did highlight the real one that she actually had. So he should have known better. Amar le Rav Acha bered Rava le Rav Asher. Hayu ba kol hamin halalu mahu. So now a question of Rav Acha, son of Rava, to Rav Asher. What if in fact she did have all of these diseases? Right? She had all three diseases, or the animal had all those problems. Then what about that? Amar le Rav Mordechai le Rav Asher. Hachi amrinan mishmei de Rava. Hayu ba kol min halalu en ze mikach ta'ut. So Rav Mordechai told Rav Asher that he learned in the name of Rava, if in fact she has all of those diseases, then it's a valid transaction. The seller can't say, oh, I thought you were just listing, right, all these things because you wanted to cover your bases, so I wouldn't be able to go back. But I didn't take them seriously, and I didn't think that she had any of these diseases. So the buyer said that. Right, the buyer said, I didn't think that she had any disease. I think you were just covering your bases. The seller said, listen, I knew she had all these diseases. I listed all of them. What else am I supposed to say? How can I be more convincing than telling you she has these three diseases? It's the buyer's fault for assuming that, well, since in other cases, the drug companies list 10 things, right? And you figure, they're just listing for the, 0.001 case. But now let's say it actually happens and all those 10 side effects happen. You can't go to the company and say, what? Why didn't you tell me? He says, we did. We listed, we told you exactly what's going to happen if you take this drug. So if they all are in fact true, then the sale is valid. Next Mishnah, הסוחר את החמור להביא עליה חיטין והביא עליה שעורין חייב. תבואה והביא עליה תבן חייב, מפני שהנפח קשה כמסוי. Someone rented a donkey with the stipulation that he's going to carry wheat. And instead he brings barley. Now barley is lighter than wheat, but he brings the same weight. So let's say he was going to bring 100 pounds of wheat. That's what he said. I'm going to use your donkey to carry this 100 pounds of wheat. Fine. The owner says, okay. In the end, he makes the donkey carry 100 pounds of barley. So it's still the same weight, but because barley is lighter, so there's a greater volume of barley that you need, and that makes it more difficult on the donkey. So if the donkey is injured because of that, it's more difficult to stabilize and carry it, so the renter is liable. And the same thing if he agreed to take grain, which is heavy, and 100 pounds of it, and instead he brought 100 pounds of straw, which is going to be a much greater volume and harder to carry, so the renter is liable. He went against the agreement in a way that was more dangerous for the animal. Because here's the key words, that volume is as difficult as weight. Okay, we're going to analyze two interpretations of this word kemasoi in the Gemara. Lavi letech chitin ve'vi letech se'orin patur ve'mosif al masa'o chayav. If they contracted to bring, a letech is a volume measure. He says, I'm going to bring this volume measure of wheat, and instead he brought the same volume measure of barley. That's okay because the barley is lighter and it's the same equal volume, so that's certainly okay. However, if he adds more to it, then he's going to be liable. Now, how much more would make him liable? How much more barley? Sumchus says in the name of Rabbi Meir that the added amount is 1 se'ah for a camel or 3 kav for a donkey. 3 kav is half of 1 se'ah. Since a camel is much bigger, so that much extra, up to that much extra, it could still handle, even though it's going to be more weight and more volume, but it could handle. More than that, that goes against the stipulations. And for a donkey, which is smaller, it can handle up to 3 kav more of barley beyond what was agreed upon, but more than that it won't be able to handle, and therefore the renter is liable. Now, Itmar Abaye Amar Kashe Kemasoi tenan, Rava Amar Kashe lemasoi tenan. So these words where that says that volume is as difficult to carry as weight, should we read it like weight? That's what Abaye says. Rava says volume is difficult to carry, difficult as a load. volume is difficult as a load or the same as weight. Now, seems similar. Let's explain the difference. Abaye amar, kashe kemasoy tenan, nifchat ki tikla, v'im mosif shelosha kabin, hayav. Abaye explains that added volume is the same problem as added weight, nifchat ki tikla, and therefore one will violate the terms of the agreement as long as one puts 3 kav more, and that would apply to weight or to volume. In other words, in the first case here, when he says, okay, you can bring 1 letech of wheat, and instead he puts, let's say, the same volume of barley. So that would be the same volume, so that's okay, and barley is lighter. But if he adds more to it, according to Abaye, that's already a problem, because volume is as problematic as weight. And just like adding more weight than what was agreed upon is going to be hardship for the donkey, so too adding more volume, even if it's actually lighter. And therefore, if one adds to the volume, it's no good. How much more? So he's going to use the same metric here that Rabbi Meir says, a se'ah, or 3 kav. We're going to go with a donkey, 3 kav for a chamor. A kav is a volume measurement. If you add that much volume, so he puts 1 letech of barley, which is lighter than 1 letech of wheat. Okay, so that's the same. That's so far so good. But if he adds more than 3 kav to the volume, then he violates the agreement. So there is that wiggle room. But that's significantly less than what Rava will say. So Rava amar, kashe lemasoy tenan, tikla ki tikla v'nifcha have tosefet. Rava says that added volume is difficult to carry. It's not as difficult as added weight, but it does add a difficulty. And therefore, when will one violate if you put barley instead of wheat? If you have the same weight, whatever weight that you were allowed to put for wheat, let's say 100 pounds, then you put instead 100 pounds of barley. Well, then that's okay, but any more than that will be no good, because that's going to add any more volume. Now, how much is that? How much is the equal weight for volume? Well, that would be a letech plus a se'ah. So you see that Rava is more lenient, whereas according to Abaye, you can put a letech of barley, and then you could add up to 3 kav, because for weight also you're allowed the extra 3 kav. In other words, for weight, everybody is in agreement that, let's say that we say you can take a letech of wheat, and then he adds 3 more kav. Up to 3 more kav, it's still within the leeway, it's permitted. Okay, Abaye and Rava would agree that added weight is a problem if it's 3 more kav. But how do you translate that into volume? So Abaye says, listen, this Abaye, volume more volume is as damaging, as difficult as more weight. And therefore, if you switch it with barley, okay, make the same letech of barley plus up to 3 kav and no more. Whereas according to Rava, you can make the weights the same. And a weight the same would mean that it will be a letech plus a se'ah of barley. A se'ah, so that's double, right? Se'ah is double 3 kav. So Rava says you can add twice as much barley as Abaye allows. And they both say a letech plus what? Plus 3 kav according to Abaye, plus a se'ah according to Rava. All right, that's the 2 ways of explaining this Mishnah. And now we're going to have a challenge against Rava from the wording of the Mishnah. Tenan, lavi letech chitin vehevi letech seorin patur, v'mosif al masa'o chayav, ma'elav shelosha kabin. So if they contracted to bring 1 letech of wheat, and then he brought instead a letech of barley, so that's okay, because that would be lighter, right? This is a challenge from the middle section of the Mishnah. However, if he added more, then he is liable. Now, how much more? Is it not 3 kabin more? So this is a proof for Abaye's reading, right? That 3 kav more than the same volume measurement is prohibited. Isn't that what it means? It says, no, lo se'ah. What it means, how much more? A se'ah more. So but how can you say it means a se'ah more, which was what Rava said? After all, the very next line in the Mishnah says, how much do you have to add in order to be liable? And Sumchus and Rabbi Meir, se'ah for a gamal, but 3 kav for a chamor. So it says right there, 3 kav, not a se'ah. Hachikama. So we have to read the Mishnah as follows in order to answer for Rava. Hecha de la shane chitin vehevi chitin seorin vehevi seorin kama yosif al maso vehechayab sumhus omer mishum Rabbi Meir sal gamal shlosha kabin lachamor. That last case is talking about a new case. It's not a continuation of the previous. They're at the middle of the Mishnah said, if you have the same volume, then patur. Period. New case. Now, if you have you're putting the same thing on the animal, you contracted for chitin and you're bringing chitin, or your contracts for barley and you're bringing barley, but you add a little more. How much more, right? Just a tiny bit more? That's okay. How much more would you be liable? So here, that's where the Meir says 3 kav. But how much more would you have to add to the volume measurement in order to be liable? According to Rava, it's a sa'ah, because a sa'ah will bring the weight of barley up to an equal weight of wheat. Tashema, Lavi letechitin, vehebi 16 seorim hayav, ha-sheloshet kabin patur, tirgemah Abaye bimchikata. We now challenge Abaye from a baraita. The baraita talks about a case where a renter contracts and rents a donkey to carry a letech of wheat. A letech is 15 se'ah. But the renter added 1 more se'ah and brought 16. Then he is liable. So we see here that he's not liable until he adds a whole se'ah. That's the opinion of Rava. But what if he added half of a se'ah, which is 3 kav? Then he would not be liable. But according to Abaye, as long as you add 3 kav or more, one is liable. So how will Abaye explain this baraita? And so we say Abaye can explain it as a smoothed over volume measure. In other words, sometimes recipes say either a teaspoon or a heaping teaspoon. So a level teaspoon is significantly less than a heaping teaspoon. Same thing with a letech. Usually we're talking about a heaping letech. So if it's a heaping letech, then you cannot add more than 3 kav over a heaping letech. So Abaye says this baraita is talking about a level letech. A level letech, if you add 3 more kav, that'll make a heaping letech. 3 more over that, that will make the cutoff point. So it's the se'ah here is necessary to half the se'ah is going to make it a heaping letech, which he usually talks about, and then the rest of it will be the 3 kav that Abaye talks about, and therefore this is reconcilable with Abaye as well. We now learn a baraita that tells us how much excess over the norm can a person or various types of boats handle before one becomes liable. Tenor banan kav la kataf. Adirib l'areba, kor la sifina, sheloshet korim leborne gedola. A kataf is a porter, from the word katif, which means a shoulder. The kataf form with a dagesh in the middle is a professional who carries things on his shoulder. So he has a norm that most people can carry. If someone hires a porter and adds up to a kav more than the usual, that's okay. But a kav and above, now you added too much. And if the porter falls and gets injured, the person who hires him has to pay for that injury. Now, if you have a small boat in Areva, then in Adiriv, half of a kor, if you add more than that over the normal amount, whatever a normal amount for an Areva is, if you add an Adiriv more than that and the boat sinks, you're liable. For a Sifina, a regular sized boat, the added amount that's too much is a kor. And for a Burni, a large ship, you can add up to 3 kurim over the normal and still be okay. but 3 korim and more, then the renter would be liable for any damage. Let's analyze Amar Mor. Kabla katef im ita de la masebe barda'atu leshadeh. Says, why should the person who hired the porter be liable? The porter is a person who has reason. So if he feels that this is too heavy, I'm going to get injured, I'm going to lose my balance, he should throw off the weight and save himself. So he should be liable himself, right? If you hire movers and tell them, okay, move this car, and then they try to pick up the car and they get injured, right? So I'm responsible. They should have said, no, this is too heavy. This is not part of our job. We're not doing it. So a person should be, the porter should be liable to take care of himself. Amar Abaye b'shachavato le'altar. Oh, so we're going to have 3 answers. Abaye says it's when he was knocked down immediately. He didn't realize how heavy it was, and immediately, someone puts it on his shoulder, and he immediately falls. He didn't have time to save himself. Rava Amar afilu tema b'shelo chavato le'altar la'sericha ela la'agra yetera. Rava says it could be even if he was able to carry it for a little bit, and then he fell over. And we're not talking about paying damages, but rather we're talking about extra pay. When can he demand an extra pay? Let's say he didn't fall over at all. This is like baggage at the airport. If it weighs too much, so then they'll carry it, but you just have to pay $100 extra. I don't have to pay if the porter behind the counter gets injured. I'm not responsible. He's responsible for himself. If it's really too heavy, he just say, I'm not going to carry it. You carry it. 2 people will carry it together, whatever. But the point is that because it's overweight, then I have to pay. How much is overweight? It's 1 kav more than the norm. Then you have to pay an added fee for his service. Rav Asher Amar hu savur chulsha hu denakit le. Rav Asher says, no, it could be that a person thinks that, I'm feeling weak. I don't know this. He thinks that this is a normal weight, and he's feeling weak. He says, okay, let me get my strength, and I'll push myself to do it. And he may not realize that really it is too heavy. He thinks that he can do it. So even a reasonable person sometimes thinks that they can pick up something that's really heavier than they can. Kod la sefina שלושת קורין לבורני גדולה מרפפה שמאמינה סתם ספינות בר תלתין קורין למי נפקא מינה למיקח וממכר. The Braita taught that a cord is too much overweight for a sefina, and 3 korin are too much overweight for a big burni boat. So the Papa says we can learn from here that what's the standard size capacity of a boat is 30 cord. In other words, we see from here that the ratio of the excess amount is 1/30 of the normal amount. So a normal boat, regular mid-sized boat, can carry 30, and if you want to add 31 up to 31, you still won't be liable. But 31 and above, then you overloaded the boat and you are liable. Okay, so why do we care? Why do we have to know what a standard size of a capacity of a boat is if you're buying and selling one? If I pay you and for a certain amount, I say I want to buy a sefina, we just say sefina, and then you deliver it, and you deliver a boat that has a capacity only for 29 se'ah. I can say that's no good. You'll say, no, it's a good se'ah. I said, no, see, we learned from here that a standard capacity of just sefina is 30, so sell me a bigger one. Next Mishnah. Kol ha'umanin shomrei sachar hen, v'chulan shamru tolat shelcha v'haveh ma'ot shomer chinam. If I have a given item, let's say a suit, to a tailor to fix for me, and he is holding it in his store. In the meantime, he is as liable as a shomer sachar. After all, I am paying him for his service, so if it gets lost or stolen, he is liable. And however, if the tailor says, listen, it's finished, come pick it up, so then it's my responsibility to come as fast as possible to pick it up, because he is not obligated to watch it anymore as a shomer sachar, but only as a shomer chinam. He's no longer getting any benefit, any extra payment for watching it. So therefore, I should come to pick it up, because he's going to be less responsible. If it's lost or stolen, he will not be responsible. Shemor li ve'eshmor lecha shomer sachar. If we trade, here, I'll watch your item and you watch my item, so we're both benefiting from that. And therefore, it does shomer sachar, being a paid bailey doesn't have to mean you're being paid money. It could be that you're being paid a service. I'm getting a service, and so are you, for us watching each other's items. Shemor li ve'amar lo hanach lefanai shomer chinam. Someone asks you, hey, can you wash this for me? And you say, oh, put it over there. That is a shomer chinam. Hilvahu al hamashkon shomer sachar. If I borrowed money from you and I gave you my watch as collateral, so you are responsible like a shomer sachar. So it's a higher level of responsibility. Rabbi Yehuda omed hilvahu ma'ot shomer chinam, hilvahu perot shomer sachar. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees and says it depends. If you lent me money and I give you a watch, then you are only a shomer chinam for that watch. However, if you lend me produce and I give you a watch as collateral for the produce, then you are a shomer sachar. Abba Shul omer, Rashay Adam laskir mashkono shel ani liot posek veholech alav mipnei shehu kemeshiv aveda. Abba Shul says that if a poor person, let's say he's poor, he has to borrow money, and he gives the lender a watch, so the lender is allowed to rent it out on behalf of the poor person and use the proceeds of that rental to pay off the loan slowly, right? That's posek veholech, because it's like returning a lost item. This watch otherwise is just going to sit there and do nothing, but it has time value. Literally, it's a time piece. And so if you rent it out, you can get a little bit of rent every day, and then that will benefit the poor person. So even though generally if someone gives you something to watch, you can't just rent it out, not for your own sake, not even for their sake. But if it's a poor person, now this will help him to pay off his loan, then that is permitted. The Gemara now asks, Lema matitin de lo kerebi meir de Tanya socher kesad meshalem, Rabbi Meir omer keshomer chinam, Rabbi Yehuda omer keshomer sachar. Let us propose that our Mishnah cannot be the opinion of Rabbi Meir, because we have a baraita regarding a socher, a renter. How responsible is a renter if something goes wrong? What would he have to pay? There's a big machloket about this. It says we treat a renter like a shomer chinam. After all, he is paying for his right to use the item. His main job is not actually to watch the item, and so for the benefit of using the item, he's paying for that. That equals out. So he's like a shomer chinam. Rabbi Yehuda, however, says he's like a shomer sachar because he's getting benefit. Then he can use the lawnmower or the hammer that he's renting. So since he gets that benefit, he is more responsible. Now, what does that have to do with our situation? We're comparing the tailor or any artisan who takes an item into his shop. We're comparing him to a renter. How so? The tailor is not getting paid to watch the item. However, he is getting benefit in having the item because now he can fix it and charge a fee. So too, a renter has the item and he can benefit because he can use the item for his work as the lawnmower, whatever he is using it for. So therefore, it makes sense that the tailor and the renter should have the same law. Well, that would be good with our Mishnah would fit with Rabbi Yehuda, who says that a renter is the same as a shomer sachar, and our Mishnah says that the tailor is also like a shomer sachar, and so they're all equal. That's fine. However, this is problematic for Rabbi Meir because Rabbi Meir says a renter is like a shomer chinam. Okay, a renter is taking the item and getting benefit from it, and yet he's a shomer chinam. So then it would make sense that the tailor should also be like a shomer chinam. He's not getting paid to watch it. He's getting benefit of having it in his store that he can now charge for fixing it. And so you see that this Mishnah cannot be the opinion of Rabbi Meir. All right, we'll have 3 tries for an answer. Afilu tema Rabbi Meir. Bahi hana'a deka shavi kule ama ve'agir le ledide have ailave shomer sachar. There is a benefit to the tailor. It's not exactly a financial benefit, but it is hana'ah. He's getting enjoyment in that this guy, the customer, he left all other tailors in the whole world, passed them by, and gave it to this tailor. So he feels happy that, look, I was chosen to be the tailor. He chose me out of all my competition. For that emotional benefit, he agrees to be a shomer sachar, and that's why it's different from a renter, where you don't have that. So we reject this. Socher nameh. A renter could say the same thing. This guy could have lent out his lawnmower to anybody, and yet he chose me. So for that emotional benefit, that he agreed that I should be the one to be able to rent his lawnmower, so I'll agree to be a shomer sachar and have the higher level of responsibility. So in that aspect, they're the same. Rabbi Meir says there is actually a financial benefit in that when someone pays the tailor a little bit of that payment, you're going to give a little extra to watch it. Take good care of it to make sure it doesn't get lost or stolen. And so for that little extra payment, for watching it, we consider that a tailor, a shomer sachar, different from a socher, a renter who we don't say that. We reject this. Socher nameh milas kina dekama shvele tefe purta. If for a renter, isn't it talking about a case where the owner gives a little bit of a discount? Normally, this renting the lawnmower will be $10, and so he charges him $9.50, and that 50 cents. That is is like a payment for watching it, to take good care of it. So that in that aspect they're also the same. Rather, we can say this Mishnah is a bimeir, and there is a direct benefit to the tailor in holding on to the clothing. What is it? It's a benefit that he's holding on to the clothing as collateral for his money. As long as he has the clothing, he doesn't have to bother coming in and going out and trying to collect the payment for his services, right? If you don't come in and if you don't come in and pay for the tailoring services, then he'll just keep your suit. And so he has a direct benefit of having the suit there. And so because of that direct benefit, he is considered a shomer sachar, and there's no parallel to that for a renter. So even a bimeir would agree that a tailor is treated like a shomer sachar and not like a socher. That's all one answer. The other strategy is to flip around the opinions. We can switch around the opinions as Rabba bar Avu does, and his version of the Braita that we've seen elsewhere. How does a renter pay? How much level of responsibility does he have? Rabbi Meir says he is like a paid bailee, whereas Rabbi Yehuda says no, he is like an unpaid bailee, and so now it actually fits Rabbi Meir perfectly. Yes, in fact, the tailor is the same as a renter, and both of them are the same as a shomer sachar. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen v'Amen.